Imagine a world 3,000 years ago. Towering empires, masters of bronze, stretched from Greece to Egypt, from Anatolia to Mesopotamia. Their palaces were filled with gold. Their trade routes spanned the known world, and their armies were seemingly invincible. They were the superpowers of their day. The Mycenaeans of Greece, the Hittites in modern-day Turkey, the mighty Egyptian New Kingdom. This was the late Bronze Age, a glorious, interconnected, and prosperous era. And then, in the span of a single lifetime, it all burned. Palaces were destroyed, cities abandoned, trade routes severed, literacy vanished in some regions, entire populations disappeared, and the world plunged into a dark age that would last for centuries. This is the story of the greatest collapse in human history, a mystery that has baffled historians and archaeologists for generations. What could possibly bring down these mighty civilizations all at once? Let's travel back to the year 1200 BCE. The world was a globalized system, surprisingly similar to our own. Tin from Afghanistan traveled thousands of miles to be mixed with copper from Cyprus, creating the bronze that equipped armies and defined the age. Grain from Egypt fed the Hittite Empire. Luxurious goods, from ivory to precious metals, moved freely across the Mediterranean. The great kings called each other brother, their correspondence filled with diplomatic pleasantries and trade agreements. It seemed like a stable, permanent order. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. Letters found in the ruins of cities like Ugarit on the Syrian coast tell a desperate story. The king of Ugarit writes to the king of Cyprus, pleading for help. He speaks of enemy ships, of cities being burned, of a looming famine. He writes, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned, and they've done evil things in my country." These were the last words ever sent from Ugarit. Soon after, it too was a smoking ruin. The most famous and enigmatic culprits in this story are a group known as the Sea Peoples. Egyptian inscriptions at Medinet Habu depict a massive land and sea invasion. Pharaoh Ramesses III boasts of his great victory against a coalition of mysterious invaders who made a conspiracy in their islands. He noms them the Peliset, the Jeker, the Shekelesh, the Denayan. They came with their families in ox carts, a migrating horde as much as an invading army. Carving a path of destruction down the Levantine coast, they destroyed the Hittite Empire, sacked coastal cities, and were only stopped at the very borders of Egypt. For a long time, the Sea Peoples were seen as the sole cause of the Collapsa barbarian tsunami that wiped the slate clean. But who were they? Their exact origins remain one of history's greatest puzzles. Theories suggest they could have been displaced Mycenaeans, Sardinians, Sicilians, or even Trojenza, confederation of peoples uprooted by some other catastrophe. The problem with blaming only the Sea Peoples is that it feels too simple. Could a band of raiders, no matter how fierce, truly bring down the entire world order? Many cities that collapsed show no signs of invasion at all. The evidence points to a more complex, interconnected crisis. Let's look at the climate. By studying ancient tree rings, pollen samples, and lake sediments, scientists have pieced together a dramatic climate shift that occurred right around 1200 BCE. The data points to a prolonged period of severe drought that gripped the eastern Mediterranean. This wasn't just a bad year or two. We're talking about a mega drought that may have lasted for decades, or even a century. For civilizations dependent on agriculture, this was catastrophic. Less rain meant failed harvests. Failed harvests meant widespread famine. Famine leads to social unrest, popular uprisings, and mass migrations as desperate people leave their lands in search of food. The desperate pleas for grain shipments found in those final letters from the Hittites suddenly make perfect sense. They weren't just facing armies, they were facing starvation. This climate change could have been the trigger that set the Sea Peoples in motion, not as conquerors, but as climate refugees. The drought destabilized the agricultural base of these empires, making them fragile and vulnerable. This brings us to our third major theory: systems collapse. Think of the late Bronze Age world not as a collection of separate empires, but as a single, complex machine. It was a highly specialized and interdependent system. The Hittites needed Egyptian grain. The Mycenaeans needed Hittite metals. Everyone needed the copper from Cyprus and the tin from the east. This interconnectedness was a source of strength in good times, allowing for immense prosperity. But it was also a critical vulnerability. It's like a chinitz, only as strong as its weakest link. Or perhaps a better analogy is a house of cards. If one critical part of the system fails, the whole thing can come crashing down. So, what happens when a megadrought hits? The grain supply dwindles, people starve. This leads to internal rebellions and civil wars. Seeing this weakness, external raiders like the Sea Peoples are emboldened to attack. Trade routes, the lifeblood of the system, are disrupted. This means no more bronze. Without bronze for weapons and tools, armies weaken and economies grind to a halt. One crisis feeds into another in a devastating feedback loop. It's not one single cause, but a perfect storm of calamities. Climate change, famine, migration, rebellion, and invasion, all hitting at once. The very complexity that made the Bronze Age so brilliant also made its collapse so total and so swift. The aftermath was a world reset. In Greece, the great Mycenaean palaces were abandoned. The art of writing, known as lineobi, was completely forgotten. Population numbers plummeted by as much as 90%. In some areas, this was the beginning of the Greek Dark Age, a period from which the tales of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey would later emerge, like half-remembered dreams of a lost golden age. The mighty Hittite Empire, which once stood equal to Egypt, vanished from history so completely that for thousands of years, people thought it was just a biblical myth, until its capital was rediscovered in the 20th century. Egypt survived, but just barely. It repelled the Sea Peoples, but was left terminally weakened, a shadow of its former self. Its great age of empire building over for good. New powers would eventually rise from the ashes. The Phoenicians, masters of the sea, would take over the Mediterranean trade routes. The Assyrians and Babylonians would build new empires in Mesopotamia. And in Greece, after centuries of darkness, a new type of society would emerge, centered on the city-state, or polis, giving birth to democracy, philosophy, and the foundations of the Western world. So, what can the Bronze Age collapse teach us today? We live in a world that is more interconnected and complex than the Bronze Age kings could have ever imagined. Our globalized economy depends on intricate supply chains. Our societies are powered by fragile energy grids, and we face our own unprecedented climate challenges. The story of the Bronze Age is a sobering cautionary tale. It shows how even the most powerful and sophisticated civilizations are not immune to collapse. It demonstrates how a convergence of crisis, environmental, social, and political can trigger a rapid and catastrophic breakdown. The mystery is not just about what happened to them, but what their fate might tell us about our own vulnerabilities. Historians and archaeologists continue to dig, to decipher ancient texts, and to analyze climate data, piecing together this epic story. Each new discovery adds another layer to the puzzle. The Bronze Age collapse reminds us that history is not a steady march of progress. It is a fragile cycle of rise and fall, of brilliance and darkness. And it serves as a powerful reminder that nothing is permanent. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries. If you found this fascinating, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments what you think was the main driver of the collapse. Until next time.